O loving God, you have loved us from before the foundations of the world. And so we ask humbly that you would take our words and speak with them. Take our minds and think through them. Take our hands and work with them. And take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you and all of creation. Amen. They are about to open up. After bringing back some seedlings from our CSA farm yesterday, our son Rowan noticed with us that the irises in our front yard, little garden patch, are about to burst into blossom. Fueled in part by this past week's thorough soaking, our front yard is joining in the rest of our spring-sprung landscape, and it is about to undergo some wild change. Our iconic story from Luke Acts this morning on the last Sunday in the Easter season is all about wild change. It's a story where the role of status quo is short-lived and no character remains the same from beginning to end. And be warned, church, it is a deeply subversive story. So great care should be taken in considering it, lest we too be changed. Our story begins with some disturbing images of violence, violation, and captivity. A slave girl is exploited for profit. As Paul and his companions continue in their inaugural travels into Europe, taking the good news of a God of compassion to the Macedonian city of Philippi, they encounter this slave girl with a so-called spirit of divination that others use against her to make money. She begins following Paul and his companions and repeating over and over again that they are of God. After a few days of this, Paul, more out of annoyance than justice, frees her of this oppressive spirit. And this simple act of liberation greatly upsets the status quo, enraging those who are profiting from her fortune-telling. Notice carefully how these fear-mongering owners mask the truth by using cutting ethnic slurs and racially biased language for exclusion to rile up the public officials. These men are disturbing the city. They are Jews. They are advocating foreign customs. They are outsiders. They believe differently. They are not from here. They must have crossed borders illegally. Mob mentality ensues, which leads to a scene of horrific shame, stripping, beating, flogging, and unjust incarceration, fanning the flames of hate speech that leads to violence. Of course, our current political context in the U.S. shares some of these Philippi-like attributes. Much of our media, as many of us as well, are stunned that someone who demeans women and the disabled, someone who desires to ban entire religious groups and ethnicities from our country, is now the presumptive nominee of one of our major political parties. Misogynistic, ethnocentric, racist, and fearful rhetoric from Donald Trump has already proven to further stoke the fires of underlying dissatisfaction, instability, and economic hardship that many face in our country. And like the slave owners from Philippi, such speech fans the flames of violence. Let's make America great again by vilifying, marginalizing, and excluding. And as worrisome and as bewildering as these things are, and as a time such as this, I am deeply grateful that we are offered up this story from Acts. I'm deeply grateful that we have a Bible story before us this morning that does not end in the building of a wall. It does not end with unjust incarceration. It ends with doors that open up. It ends with people's hearts that open up. It ends with a God's ground-shaking power opening us all up to liberation. And it ends with water. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Oh, we cannot hear those words enough these days. The waters of baptism, the waters of liberation. Notice the powerful picture that emerges from the end of this story. The jailer washes his prisoner's wounds. Once a part of the system that oppresses the innocent, this jailer is converted to the ways of love and through water cleans the wounds he was complicit in afflicting in the first place. And notice how more water is likely drawn from the same source. It is then used to baptize him and his entire household. Water as healing, water as reconciliation, water as community. And a new, beautiful, spirit-infused community emerges. The waters of baptism as a sign of how significantly the jailer's life is changed, from oppressor to believer in God's unconditional love. This is wild change. Today in our service, we will have the wild joy of celebrating the sacrament of baptism with Tori and Ryan Surrett, who will receive the far more than symbolic waters of new life as they, with their loving parents, mark a true milestone. This sacramental, this sacred, this set-apart milestone is one that amplifies the profound truth that has already and will always be undergirding their lives. They are loved by God. The waters of baptism upon their precious heads become a physical, real sign and seal that they are God's beloved children, unconditional and always. And this momentous sign means something. It makes a difference. For baptism changes us in wild ways. Like the characters from Acts' story today, it does not leave us where we start. The waters of life, the waters of God, are incredibly powerful, and they change things. They can change the world. Duly warning ourselves, church, that what we're about to take part in today, we joining with Ryan and Tori, is not some passive, symbolic, bucolic tradition for the sole purpose of taking nice, cute church family photos. Baptism is radical, it is subversive, it is beautiful, and it is sacramental transformation. There's a reason we use H2O as a part of this sacrament. You will hear later in our liturgy this morning that water appears throughout our scriptures as a sign of cleansing, renewal, and liberation. The waters parted as they were led out from liberation, led out from captivity under Pharaoh. In our world and in our lives, we know that water is a liberating and wild gift. And those of us who live in this Charles River watershed or nearby, where we are able to go up to a faucet in a sink, even in a bathroom hallway, and turn it on and drink that water, most of the world would be absolutely stunned by that miraculous reality. We often can take water for granted. The horrific realities in Flint, Michigan, and increasingly other cities where drinking water has been laced with lead bring this taking for granted into sharp relief. We know that water heals us. That's where we put our burned hand when we need healing. Water sustains us. We can't live without it. And water is us, 60% or so of our bodies. Water is, by very definition, communal. It, of course, is H2O in those groupings of molecules, but it is also that single raindrop. But we often think of water in its communal form, as rain, as a lake, as a glass to quench our thirst. We think of it in its communal force. There is power, sustenance in the oneness that is water. Just as we hear in our gospel reading today, Jesus prays to God that we would all be one like. We would be one. We would be a communal force, connected like water. An important part of the sacrament of baptism is, of course, remembering. Whenever someone is baptized, we are all called to remember our baptism or the baptism of others. We are called to remember how we are connected to one another, connected as raindrops that collect one after the other, pitter-patter on the landscape until they gather into small tributaries that eventually flow into more powerful, sustaining rivers that shape the landscape. Baptism reminds us that together, real and powerful lasting change is possible. When we come together, as Jesus prays that we will, we can more effectively be the people and communities that we are called to be in the first place. Together as one, we can reach our destination, our goal, the sea. We can reach the place we are called more effectively. Like the jailer, it begins with an individual choice to respond to the good news. It begins with an individual conversion. But it very quickly expands from there to a greater whole. The jailer's entire family chooses to follow in that good news. Imagine the impact of the others that were incarcerated in the story with Paul and Silas as they heard them singing and praying at midnight and witnessed the subsequent events of liberation and restoration. Although our text does not say it, we hope and pray that the slave girl, after being healed of the oppressive spirit by Paul, is also able to find liberation from those who exploited her. Perhaps she found refuge with the growing community of liberation forming in Philippi. Perhaps she found her way to Lydia's, that wonderful woman we heard about last week, the woman of purple, the woman of radical hospitality and welcoming. Baptism affirms that there is a river-strong power in communities of faith. Power not just to counter the Donald Trumps of our world, but power to care for the least of these, the most disenfranchised. Power to rise up in courage, to speak out in love. Today's subversive, anti-imperial, and anti-racist story from Acts actually does not end with the baptism of the jailer, so beautifully read by Mary this morning. It continues for a few more verses that we didn't read. It goes this way: when morning came, the magistrate sent the police, saying, "Let those men go." And the jailer reported the message to Paul, saying, "The magistrate sent word to let you go, therefore come now and go in peace." But Paul replied, "They have beaten us in public, uncondemned men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison, and now they are going to discharge us in secret? Certainly not. Let them come and take us out themselves." The police reported these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Roman citizens, so they came and apologized to them, and they took them out and asked them to quickly leave the city. After leaving the prison, Paul and Silas went to Lydia's home, and when they had seen and encouraged the brothers and sisters there, they departed. Paul and Silas here refuse an easy freedom. They refuse impartial justice. They rise up boldly in the face of oppression and demand to be seen. They demand to be taken seriously and recognized as fully equal. Friends, this is the call of baptism: to rise up comfortably into our own skin, knowing deep within that we are loved by God. To find an inner core stability, an inner core sense of self, even in the face of fear and uncertainty. Notice that after receiving a full apology from the authorities and they are set free to go, Paul and Silas choose to plunge right back into community. They return to the newly baptized Lydia's home, where they were so profoundly previously welcomed. And in that place, they share with each other and find mutual encouragement and inspiration. The call of baptism is the call to inspire each other. The baptized life is the same as a deeper communal life. Friends, we are living in some deeply inspired communion and community days in this day and in this week. Today, we are not only encouraged by Tori and Ryan getting baptized, but as Darcy, their dear mother, becoming a full member of this congregation. And that honors us as a congregation, Darcy, Tori, and Ryan. You need to know that. And this past week was the first full week of our new parish administrator and building manager, Ben Crosby, who has brought some new life and vitality and vigor to our church context. Today, of course, Julie has mentioned, there are many feet walking for peace to end gun violence. And last week, many feet walked for justice to help end hunger. And last night, many faithful souls gathered in Bates Hall to celebrate, indeed, that life is a cabaret. And the hat was passed to support our mission partnership in Nicaragua. Some of you will be attending climate justice actions this coming month, risking arrest in connection with an international breakthrough nonviolent civil disobedience movement for climate justice. Some of you will be attending an anti-racism training later this month. Many of you have contacted your legislators in the Massachusetts Senate to vote in support of HB 1577, SB 735, that bill that is seeking protection for our transgender-based staters. This Thursday, our Senate votes. Some of you have been playing music and singing in upcoming concerts. These are all, and many more that are unmentioned, inspiring things that are happening, friends, in the midst of this watershed of faith. And these are ways, and there are many ways, that we can support each other in these things. There are also poignant things happening in our lives together. Many of you right now are quietly in accompaniment, walking with, and sometimes in heartbreaking ways, your loved ones who are aging and dying. These are serious times. These are grounding times. And at times like these, we encourage you and all of us to remember baptism. Remember that we are not alone, but deeply connected, flowing with one another. And God is with us, calling all of us to open up. The irises that are poised to open up in our front garden patch speak not only about beauty, but about community and the communion of saints. For they come handed down to us and to our son as Rowan's great-great-grandmother first planted them in Boston many years ago. And lovingly, they have been transplanted over and over again, handed down from generation to generation. So as they emerge, the beauty that comes forth, it's appropriate to remember on this Mothering Sunday that often repeated quote of my dear mother, to stop and smell the flowers. May we, friends, on this Mothering Sunday, on this celebrating Baptism Sunday, and on every day, may we stop and smell the unfolding grace of God, that same God who challenges us, who changes us, who liberates us, and always loves us. Amen.